So, today I'm going to respond to Cat Blaque, who is perhaps one of the worst people to ever exist in the history of the universe. So, I gotta mentally prepare for this. As some of you guys know, I am close online friends with Prince of Queens, and when Prince was just a nobody floating around on the internet, she basically slandered him, essentially just portrayed him just completely out of context, and revealed his full name, his full profile picture, when he only had like 100 friends on Facebook. He was just a nobody, and he has always had a mass amount of personal loathing for her since, not surprisingly, and everybody else hates her too, obviously. So, I'm going to respond to one of her videos. Now, most of her videos are just kind of boring, which is why I haven't really responded to them, but this one is pretty interesting. It's going to be about gender binary privilege. Yeah! So let's get into the video.
True Tea. Your questions, my brutal honesty.
Let's jump into today's Snapchat question. If you guys want me to answer your questions, please send me your question in video form to my Snapchat. It is Cat Blaque, all one word. And also, if you're not subscribed already, please feel free to subscribe so you can get True Tea every single week right here on this channel.
Oh god, that smirk. That condescending little smirk. I just hate it. And look at those hair extensions. I mean, if we're going to be talking about privilege here, Kat is one of the most privileged people on earth, as much as she may be complaining. My oppression, I'm a black, oppressed trans woman. Kat, you're not oppressed. You're not oppressed, girl. You're not oppressed.
So let's jump into this week's question.
Hey Kat, I've got a question that I would love to hear your thoughts on for a True Tea video. So the other day I was making a thread on Twitter where I kind of came to the realization that I think in our society there's a form of binary gender privilege. And as a non-binary person, I experienced that in the form of existing in a culture that only really has a concept of gender that is binary based. And the main point of the thread was that I kind of find it really hard at times to relate to specific experiences that some individuals on the trans spectrum experience. Because though I do fall under that umbrella, I don't feel like everyone else who does relates to or shares many experiences with me because their experience of gender is more binary than mine. It feels like language, representation, gendered spaces, all of these things have been conceptualized in such a way that cater to those who have a binary experience. And while I think it's obvious that those who are under the trans umbrella, who are transgender, are starting to gain more mainstream exposure, part of me has to wonder whether one of the many reasons that might be is that mainstream individuals have an easier time conceptually understanding one who typically transitions from one end of the binary to the other, but still leaves the mainstream individual scratching their head and wondering what the heck it means when someone says, hey, my experience of gender isn't binary. So that was a lot, but I would love to know what your thoughts are on the idea of binary gender privilege and whether or not you think it really exists. And that's it. Thanks, honestly, for, taking the time to listen to our questions and everything. And sorry my head's all wrapped up, girl, taking care of my hair.
So basically what this dude is saying, and he is a dude, because he presents completely as a guy. I mean, if you're supposed to be non-binary, why do you have a mustache completely and utterly look like a guy? I mean, put some effort into it, man. Come on. You don't even look like Riley J. Dennis. Like, come on, dude. You're saying basically that you're so oppressed that even trans people don't understand. You're on the trans spectrum. The trans spectrum. Kill me. Kill me. It's funny how Kat is probably the greatest whiner about cultural appropriation, yet she's perfectly fine with these kind of people bitching about, oh, I'm so oppressed, I experience the same thing as trans people, even though I present and live completely as a male, but I'm non-binary, you guys. No. Let me give some of my experience, like, sit down, man, pop a squat here, okay, so for over here, I've been wearing a binder that makes it very hard to really run or to really get my heart rate up, because otherwise I'll get out of breath and it'll be kind of hard to breathe in, and sort of my breathing will be kind of all weird and out of sync. So I have to be very careful about that. When I exercise, I wear compression shirts because I can absolutely not wear a binder or exercise. That is an absolute no-no. I meticulously pay attention to how I dress to appear as male as possible, so that I pass well. I speak in the lowest tone I can possible, so that my voice passes as male. I receive injections of hormones every 2 weeks, so that I can transition. I have to go through that. I've been taking hormone blockers for the past 14 or 15 months. I've been taking hormones for the past 7 months. I'm planning on getting top surgery, hopefully this summer. I'm planning on moving on with hysterectomy and phalloplasty, which is a insanely complex surgery, not to get too much into detail with it. Of course, those surgeries will be when I'm 18 and old enough, because those are extremely complex surgeries, and obviously I can't make those sorts of decisions when I'm still under 18. But my point is, all of those things that I'm going through, or planning on going through, and I haven't even brought up the whole name and gender change, which is an insane bureaucratic process. I haven't even gotten to getting my state ID. All of those things come with being trans. All those things come with transition. And I'm just the beginning of my transition. And what have you done? You've done literally nothing. You're like Varmint Coyote, basically. Oh, I'm a trans woman, but I've got a beard, and yet I'm a trans woman. Even Varmint Coyote wears a bow, dude. What are you doing? You've got your hair wrapped up in some... I mean, that's not a beanie. I don't know what that is. Is that like some... That's not a turban either. I don't know what it is. What have you done? This is so irritating how he claims to be trans and somehow even more press going through even more things than actual trans people do. Dude, honestly. So, sorry I had to rant. I just had to get that out there because I'm just the beginning of my transition, and yet I can guarantee I've been through so much more strife than this dude has. I can guarantee.
Alright, so I have a couple of thoughts on this, and I'm going to start out by saying that I feel like I'm going to say some stuff that maybe some people aren't going to like, but this is true tea. The point of it is for me to be very raw and to be unmeasured and to just say what's off the top of my mind.
Yeah, you've got that condescending smirk. Yes, very, very genuine of you, Kat. I mean, you can just tell how performed this is. Nothing she says is genuine. This is basically all a show. We know what you're doing, Kat. You're a narcissist. You're manipulative. Everyone knows that you're just here to manipulate people and to basically just exploit people. And what Prince of Queens was saying, what I agree with, is that whatever Kat does, whatever situation Kat would be in, she just goes with whatever is the most popular. So if SJWism wasn't as popular, she would be doing something else that would be allowing her to manipulate people.
So here we go. So I want to start out by saying that I definitely believe that there is a thing such as binary gender privilege, right? And that's definitely something that's been obvious in my life because I was somebody who at one point in my life did identify as queer. And for me, that was about queering all the spaces, queering gender, queering politics, queering everything.
Okay, I don't understand what she means when she says queering spaces, queering gender. I thought identifying as queer meant that you weren't straight, that you were gay or bisexual. So what does that have to do with gender? What does that have to do with queering spaces? What does that have to do with anything? I don't understand what she's talking about.
Everything was queering, and what that meant to me, you know, what that meant was, you know, a change as the days went on. But for me, that was definitely something that I at one point in my life felt was very much part of who I was, right? And in that phase of my life, I definitely confused a lot of people. I definitely, you know, made a lot of people kind of like question about where my gender was and things like that. And I didn't mind that at that point in my life. I talked about this before, but then when I went away to college and I was kind of separated from all of my like high school people and the people who knew me from summer school and things like that, it kind of helped me to sort of see myself for who I actually was. And that was a binary trans woman and not this person who, went between genders and queered all the spaces, right? So that's personally my journey, right? And in that journey, I definitely noticed that when I was somebody who, picked a side, as a lot of people like to say, my life did become a lot easier. It was a lot more easy for me to communicate who I was because it was something that people were already familiar with. People could understand a she, they could understand, someone with a feminine name, someone who looks feminine, someone who they could look at, assume was female, assume used she pronouns, and that was just easy for them, right? So everything became easier for me. And I can definitely say that as a trans person, even though I definitely have gone through all of these different things with changing this and changing that, I do live a fairly uncontroversial life, even though I'm trans. And I know that a very big part of that is because I am a feminine trans woman who people read as cis.
So what Kat is doing here is basically apologizing for being a trans woman who passes. And good on you, Kat, that you're trans and that you pass well. Why is that something you have to apologize for? Good for you that you pass well. How does that make you privileged? I don't get it. What, because people don't see you as some sort of gender amalgamation? Oh, what?
So for me, it's one of those things that I just sort of fit in a box, and it is what it is, and things are comfortable for me, and so I'm fine, right? And I recognize that for non-binary people, that can be hard because there are a lot of people who are non-binary who people are going to look at and just assume this is what their gender is. And I've had a lot of conversations with myself about a lot of the ways in which we include non-binary people in certain conversations. And I'll be very honest with you guys, that's what True Tea is all about. There is a part of me that finds myself frustrated in some ways with how we talk about non-binary people. I don't know how to reconcile it. It's hard for me to not feel like I'm being misgendered when I have to sit down in a space and explain what my pronoun is.
So you basically feel frustrated by all the special little snowflakes appropriating the experiences of trans people. So you're admitting that non-binary people are making it harder for trans people. Thank you for ruining your own narrative, Kat. You could have just edited the video right there.
On the flip side, I also understand that that's something that's very inclusive and helpful to non-binary people. So there's a part of me that's like, girl, get over it. But there's another part of me that's like, I feel really kind of messed up for having to sort of come back to a place that I was in way back when to explain what should be obvious, that my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
Exactly, it should be obvious because you pass as female. Have we really come to the point in the world where we can't call women women and men men because it might offend someone that man might be non-binary, who knows? I mean, seriously, honestly, this is just proof that it makes it really hard for trans people to be themselves.
That's kind of where I think the confusion for me is sort of at, because I kind of feel, and maybe I'm wrong, feel free to drag me for this, that non-binary people to some degree need to accept that there's no listen, most people in this world are he or she's. Most people in this world are his or hers. That is just average.
Exactly, Kat. Thanks for making an actual decent point. That is actually completely correct. That is the way it is. Most people are not subscribed to that particular ideology. That's just how it is.
And so people aren't going to always look at you and just know that you're non-binary. There is no like one unified non-binary look. There are people who, a lot of people would look at and assume we're one way. I mean, I've met trans women who prefer, I take that back. People who you would look at and maybe assume were trans women who don't use she pronouns.
Then why do they appear as trans women? See, this is just really proof that you can only be one or the other. Like you said, how do you look non-binary? If non-binary was a thing, why do these people look like trans women, or look like trans men, or look like women, or look like men? It's so frustrating.
It's the same for people who are a little bit more on the masculine side of trans expression. So it gets confusing. And I do think that sometimes people get very upset when people don't get this sort of thing, like when people don't understand. Like, listen, as somebody who's been misgendered, I understand how messed up it can feel. I get how upsetting being misgendered is 100%. But, you know, me being misgendered versus you being misgendered is a little bit more complicated. I mean, when I'm somebody, you know, like there was a time where, like, when I first started, you know, expressing my gender in a feminine way, and people would misgender me, it would be this frustrating thing where it was like, okay, well, I'm obviously expressing some sort of femininity. That was me and my very contrived view at the time. So why are you referring to me as anything other than she?
And that's a perfectly rational way of looking at it. If you present a certain way, it only makes sense that people would call you that certain way. What is wrong with this form of logic? I don't get it.
Right? Like, why wouldn't that be where your mind would first go, right? It was like this, oh my God, why isn't this obvious sort of thing? And I think what people don't get, I think what people don't understand is that the narratives around transness have changed very drastically in the past, like 10 years.
So what you're basically trying to say is that you're going against that logic. You're saying that somebody can present completely as a female and say, no, I'm non-binary. This is so irritating.
There is a lot more conversation about people who are non-binary. That's always existed, but there are a lot of more conversations about that now. So, whereas when I was coming up, it was just the thing to do to transition, assimilate, pick a side, so to speak.
It's not about pushing people to pick a gender. It's about the fact that there are only two genders, and that's just the simple fact of the matter.
And just go forward from there. Now there's a lot more conversations about people having gender identities that are neither here nor there, which I think is amazing. And it's because as somebody who's known trans people who have detransitioned because they picked a side that wasn't really where they were, I'm totally in favor of people being non-binary, not having gender identities that are here nor there. So I'm 100% in support of that, especially because I don't think that pushing people to pick a gender is necessarily the right thing that we should do. Right. But there's also me having to like reconcile how I personally feel about, you know, things in terms of my own journey, you know, so there's a lot of like different feelings I have on the topic. And I know that a lot of things I said in this video could probably be construed as, you know, anti-non-binary, and I want to just make it clear that that's not how I feel at all.
So again, you have to apologize. Oh, I'm so sorry, it's anti-non-binary, because I used to think that if you present as female, it makes sense to call you a female, and I used to think it was obvious that people would call me a she. Yeah, it is obvious that people would call you she, because you look like a she, even though you're trans. This just hurts to watch.
It is something that's still hard for me as a binary trans woman to kind of wrap my mind around. Not in that, not the concept of the gender identity, but really how we navigate around it. Because most people are going to look at a person who's non-binary and assume that you're neither here nor there. The average person doesn't use they pronouns, and I don't know if necessarily using they pronouns with everyone is something that I don't know. I have weird feelings about that too, because at one point I used to say they pronouns is just how you're supposed to do it. That's just how that's supposed to go. It makes the most sense, right? But then at the same time, it's also like, okay, well, if you use they pronouns with someone like myself, who is a binary trans woman who very much, like I said, fought to be, you know, considered she and use she, and then you use they pronouns, it's like you're taking my gender away from me in the interest of being inclusive to someone that I'm not part of. You know, I'm not non-binary. So like, why are you, in the interest of trying to be inclusive, in erasing me?
So actually, Kat, again, being logical, this is a lot better and more logical video than I thought it would be, actually. She's saying, why would you call me they? I'm clearly a she. But it's funny how she isn't including how society would perceive this. Like, why would society call you a they? You're clearly a she. It would be very inconvenient to use a pronoun that isn't even widely used in the singular. Why would anybody really call anybody a they? It's just inconvenient to use they pronouns in the singular. like that, unless you don't know the gender of the person. If you know the gender of the person, it's just inconvenient. Why are you not considering that? Why are you not considering how the rest of society might perceive this, and just about your own personal little trans community and how you might want to be inclusive? Like the fact that you should think that everybody had to use they pronouns for everybody. How does that make any sense? Why? How is that more inclusive or help anyone at all? That just makes everything more confusing. It makes it even harder to accept trans people. If people think that trans people are just these oversensitive little snowflakes who think that you should use they pronouns for literally everyone.
If that makes any sense. So I have a lot of different feelings about this, and I do think that, like, my perspective is very... Ooh, I almost spilled everywhere. I do think that my perspective is very slanted because of how I view my own gender, and because of how I've experienced my gender, and because of how transition has gone, and because of how these conversations have changed, right? But I would really love to hear what you guys think about this, because I think I've basically said what I want to say.
Okay, so that was basically the end of her video. So to conclude, this was a much more rational video than I thought it was going to be. But no, there's no such thing as binary privilege. That makes no sense. Being a special little snowflake does not make you more oppressed than a person who's not a special little snowflake. Especially a trans person who's not a special little snowflake. Okay? A trans person actually has to struggle through things. Stop comparing your experiences. So I guess I'm more mad at the guy who asked her the question than her. But the fact that she's indicating that, oh, you can just present however you want and still be non-binary is just ridiculous. And you're still a smug, condescending idiot cat, even though you did say some rational things in this video. So to conclude, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.
Feel the funk blast!